All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us again today. We are back with Dr. Roger Hall. I've got, in my mind, a super exciting topic today about what I would consider the best leadership type. And we're going to talk to Dr. Hall about resonant leaderships. First of all, why you should consider yourself a leader, give yourself some credit in that space, the difference kind of between types and styles, and then what is a resonant leader, and then get you into some detail about what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. So I'll introduce Dr. Hall. He's a longtime business psychologist, executive coach, public speaker, and a multi-time author. And as I often discuss, kind of my favorite aspect is the neuro nerd side of him, so we can actually talk about how our brain's wired, how we're designed, and how things work. So actually, where the rubber meets the road. So with that, I'll bring Dr. Hall on and just kind of enlighten the folks to briefly what a resonant leader, like what direction we're going in with the resonant leader.
Yeah, this is a distinction that Daniel Goleman made in his ideas about emotional intelligence, and the distinction, I'll just name it, is the difference between a resonant and a dissonant leader, and in this time together, we'll explain what those look like and how they look different.
So I will label this as what I believe to be the preferred or the usual best, but there are probably occasions where, sometimes a different type might work. But anyway, we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure a dissonant leader ever wins.
Yeah. I know we always, kind of look at both sides, but you're right. This one's pretty cut and dry as to why it's the better, the leadership types. So
Yeah, yeah.
very good. Well, with that, I'll do some quick housekeeping here. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jared Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at My Home Connection, also known as MHC Realty. Our sponsor for today is in large part a collaboration with My Home Connection and Dr. Hall in introducing business, life, mentoring, coaching, and all that into your real estate business. We're really trying to look at it from a holistic view and bring different aspects and components and tools into your real estate business and into your life in general. So if you have questions about any of these or all these items here, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to have that conversation. But in bringing Dr. Hall on, I guess one of the things we wanted to talk about, we kind of broke it down to types and styles, right? I think everybody's heard of different leadership styles, and we're not talking about that today, but we're talking about the dissonance and the resonant leader.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are the authoritative style, the consensus building style, the integrative style. So there are a number of different names for these different ways to lead, all of which have value, but that's not what we're going to talk about today.
And can these two styles play into those different, or sorry, these two types play into those styles?
Yeah, because one is productive and one is generally unproductive, and so you can adopt one of these other styles, but if you haven't figured out this one piece, you won't be effective.
Excellent. Well, I will tell the audience that just in my understanding, you're educating myself and my team on these types, and obviously the preferred type. Uh, Not only my real estate career, but my relationships, friendships, and with my children, and just people in general. These tools apply everywhere, and it's amazing when you start incorporating this approach to your relationships.
Yeah. Um, One of the fun things about my job is people come to me to help them improve better at work, and they always tell me, almost invariably tell me, "Oh, and this is really helping me at home too. Did you mean to do that?" And my my regular answer is, "You're the same person everywhere you go. So if you make a change in one area, it'll improve. If you improve in one area, you'll improve in the other area
Yeah. Well, let's
because
go ahead.
the principles work everywhere."
Sure, sure. And we talk about this often, right? Is this holistic approach to if you're working on an area of your life, it's benefiting another area of your life, right? If you're
Yes.
physically healthy, you've got more energy for work and your kids, or what if you're emotionally, I don't know, distracted or unstable or anxious, anxiety ridden or whatever, it translates. So
Yeah, it does.
let's kind of start from the idea of, and we've talked about this on occasion, but I think people in general are just very, uh, they are underestimating their opportunities or the times in which they could and should be a leader. Can you kind of speak to what your experience has been or what your thoughts are on the matter?
Yeah, so I'll back up. When I tell people I'm in the leadership development business, they they all have this kind of fuzzy impression of what is that. And so do you teach people to wear a different color tie, or do you teach people the clothes to wear, what special secret language to use? And invariably I say leadership development is personal development for people in leadership positions. Now, how do you get into a leadership position? Some of it is earned. In other words, you carry yourself in such a way that people look to you and want to follow your lead. The other is when you are placed in a position of leadership. So probably the first time I was ever placed in a position of leadership was when I was a sixth grade school crossing guard. And so they asked for volunteers to hold a stick with flag on it to make sure kids didn't cross against the traffic. And I had this little sash, this orange sash, and a little belt with a badge on it. I'm 11 or 12 years old, and I had a stick with a flag on it. And what that meant is, in that position, the little kids would look to me to tell them what to do. Now, I could have used that position very badly and let them cross against traffic, and they'd end up with a dead kid. That would be a bad leader. But anytime, no matter how old you are, how young you are, how big your position is, or how small your position is, when people look to you for direction, you are a leader. So if you are a parent, you are the leader of your children. If you are a Sunday school teacher, you are the leader of the kids or even adults in that class. If you are asked by a group of people to represent a work group to a committee, well, then you're a leader there. And so when we talk about leadership, very often we think, oh, the only people who do leadership are people, people in big time positions, super important positions, or world famous positions. We think of presidents, prime ministers, and those are certain types of leaders. And then we think of people who are in charge of large corporations, and those are a different kind of leader. But the skills work everywhere because people are pack animals, or herd animals, depending on whether you like to eat meat or you don't. That was a joke.
Yeah.
So whether we're pack or herd animals, we tend to group together and work in groups. And there's a lot of research on how human beings tend to congregate in groups, and people either earn the leadership, they're trustworthy enough, expert enough, attractive enough that people put them in a position of leadership, or some other higher authority has put them in an ascribed position of leadership. I think where this came to me after the crossing guard experience is my first real job was as a theater doorman. And so I would tear tickets at the movie theater. Well, I was 15 years old. I had to get a work permit because I wasn't old enough to work. I was making less than minimum wage, which they can do for people under the age of 16. And there I am. I have this red jacket on, and I'm tearing tickets. And it's really, it's not a very hard job. If you ever need a job, that's not a hard one. But when there were unruly people in the movie theater, these grown-ups would come out to me, this 15-year-old, and say, "There's a man bothering me. Can you make him stop?" And I'm thinking, I'm a kid. You're a grown-up. Do it yourself. But I had the red jacket, okay? Yep. And so I was in this position of legitimate authority. And so I, as a 15-year-old who didn't know anything, I'd have to walk into an R-rated movie, which I wasn't legally allowed to see, in order to kick out an unruly customer who was kind of drunk, and I wasn't even old enough to drink. So there you go. So I was in that position, a leader. So it doesn't matter if you're a kid, if you're a teenager, if you're an adult. It doesn't matter how many people. But if someone is looking to you for direction, you become a leader.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible responsibility. There's a story about a fire that happened in a restaurant in Kentucky, and it was a bunch of different rooms all glommed together, and there was no good exit planning, and there was no good there was no good routes of egress, and a fire started, and people got trapped. And who was it who saved the day? Which people were these? And this was it was called the Beverly Hills Supper Club, but it was in Kentucky, and so this fire is going on, and so all of these people who are elites in this part of Kentucky are there. You know, these people who are business owners, grown-ups, and their families are there, and city leaders, civic leaders, all these people were there when the fire broke out. Who took over? The waiters, the busboys, the cooks.
Yeah. Go figure.
Why? Because they were wearing uniforms.
Yeah.
And everybody just deferred to them. So here you have these young people who are leading out grown-ups to save their lives. And so depending on your context, you may not think of yourself as a leader. But if you're a busboy at a restaurant and there's a fire, well, suddenly you become the leader.
Yeah.
So this is for everybody.
Yeah. No, I love that idea. We've talked about that if people gave themselves some credit for the times that they're in a leadership role and took it responsibly and, you know, acted accordingly, because sometimes you're in a leadership position, you don't realize it, and you do something, you know, that's not leading by very good example, and that's the takeaway, right?
And that's the takeaway. And so, again, think of it. Anytime someone looks to you for direction, then you become a leader. And the way human beings work is whenever we're uncertain, we look to other people to tell us how to behave or what to do.
Yeah.
And so every time you're in a position where other people are uncertain, you can become the leader.
Yeah. I had mentioned to you, because I had heard, I think it was either in a book or another podcast or something like that, that somebody had mentioned that the average person has about 10,000 opportunities to be a leader in a lifetime, which was kind of a staggering number because we didn't usually think of what leadership means. But, you know, now that we're talking about those opportunities, you begin to go, oh, there's a lot more opportunities to be a leader than I would have thought.
I'm going to do some math.
Yeah. If you're lived to an average age,
yeah,
and you're doing like,
they're saying that's 27 leadership opportunities a year. No, is that right? Or no, that's 27 years of leadership opportunities. So 10,000 divided by 365 is, if you did a leadership act every day, that would be 27 years of leadership.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a lot of leadership. And so what it says is, for most people, every other day or every third day for your entire life, you will be a leader.
Yeah, I think that brings some weight to it. It's like, hey, when is my
yeah,
occasion?
absolutely.
You know, it's not just that CEO or that upper management person
Right.
anymore. It's, hey, that little kid, he sees me as tall and something stands out and he's kind of looking for direction. I'm a leader at that moment in time.
Yeah. Again, anytime somebody else is uncertain, they're going to look to someone to lead them. And you can be that person.
I love it. Well, let's, so we already kind of talked about the next slide. We talked about the two types, resonant and dissonant. And then the different styles. So I'll just go on to the next slide. But at a high level, 30,000 foot view, what's kind of the definition of a resonant leader?
Yeah, it's a leader who has influence. And what resonance talks about is more of an emotional frequency. And frequency talk never makes sense to me. So let's describe it a different way. If you're on a swing and you're swinging back and forth, you're swinging in a frequency.
Okay.
Well, if somebody pushes you at the right time, right as you're at the top of your swing and just coming back down, they can push you a little bit and you can go even faster. And so that is a resonant level of energy,
Okay.
that it's going in sequence with the swing. Dissonant energy is when you're coming back down and the person stops you,
Yep.
and you get jolted.
Gotcha.
And so if you think about a resonant versus a dissonant leader, it's how do they manage the emotion of a situation? A resonant leader will join in the movement, the emotional movement or the emotional frequency of another person, and then press it in a way that's more beneficial. A dissonant leader is jarring, and you've all met the
Yep.
dissonant leader. They walk into the room, they say the wrong thing, they crack a joke when they shouldn't. The current comment is read the room. Well, they don't read the room.
Yeah.
And so they say the wrong thing, and it's like fingernails on a chalkboard, if that's even an expression anymore.
No, for those of you that use chalkboards, yeah.
So I mean, it's a screeching. It pulls things to a screeching halt. Now, a resonant leader does quite the opposite. And again, this is one of the more advanced concepts in Goleman's idea about emotional intelligence. And the way I split up his theory is it's monitoring and managing yourself and others. So monitoring yourself is self-awareness. Managing yourself is self-control. Monitoring others is empathy. Are you able to successfully and accurately guess what the other person is thinking and feeling? That's empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's always a guess because none of us is got
Mind readers.
sight. None of us is psychic. Yeah, we're not mind readers. But the last one is how do you manage the thoughts and emotions of others? And that's where resonance comes in. So it requires to be in order to be a resonant leader, you have to know yourself. You need to know your thoughts and emotions. You have to be able to manage your thoughts and emotions. You have to be able to observe, monitor the thoughts and emotions of others. That's empathy. But then you have to be able to manage the thoughts and emotions of others. Now, that's when you get to resonance. So when you're able to join people where they are emotionally, now here's the important point, and then draw them to a new emotional state.
Powerful.
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
So when somebody is emotionally upset or angry, the easy response is snap out of it, which never works, or calm down, which never works. And so those are all dissonant responses to people who are emotionally overwhelmed. They're either angry, they're either fearful, they're either or they're ashamed. One of those emotions typically predominates. And if you tell them to snap out it, cut it out, whatever, all of that is dissonant, or you crack the wrong joke. All of that is dissonant. A resonant leader joins the person in their emotional state and joins them for long enough that the other person recognizes, oh, okay, this person understands me. Mm-hmm. This person gets where I am.
Yeah.
And then once they trust you, that you get them, and they're the only ones who get to determine that. You don't get to say, okay, I'm super trustworthy now, so you should be listening to me because
right.
I'm
You're
super
earning
smart.
The right.
Yeah. So you have to earn that right, and you have to wait for them to. You have to do all the behavior to help them to self-regulate, which is calming talk, soothing talk. There's a marital researcher named John Gottman. He calls it honey talk, and it's the way you talk to a child who's hurt. And you say it in ways that calm them down. And if you think about it, what's happening in our brain when we're emotionally overwhelmed is we're having an electrical firestorm in our head. Mm-hmm. And someone's tone of voice can change the way your brain is firing. Isn't that amazing?
Crazy.
Through
That's amazing.
language and tone of voice, we can help someone's brain change the way it's firing.
Wow.
And and that's what language does. Language is this special tool, and tone of voice and sound are these special tools that allow us to help people calm down.
Yeah.
But it takes time. It's not easy. So once they've begun to self-regulate, then you can help them adapt their thinking so they can move their thinking to a different place.
Mm-hmm.
So they can think differently.
So I like the idea. Well, maybe I want to get into the detail, but you described the sequence of getting to the point where you can help them manage and regulate their emotions. But in my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a high degree of importance of that sequence. You can't help somebody else if you're not in a position to help them, right? If I'm not monitoring my emotions, if I'm not managing my emotions, how do I begin to do that for somebody else? Because, the example that popped into my head as you were talking is, like some people, if they feel like they're in a sales position and they're feeling anxious about it, their voice goes up because their vocal cords restrict. And, clearly your mind is doing its own thing, right? It's firing and anxious and like, and now your tone is off.
Right.
You're not helping that other person. So going backwards to get to the position where you even become able to be a resonant leader, meaning what you talk a lot about is metacognition, thinking about your thinking and being
Right.
good at that to realize that, hey, my mind went off on some tangent that is not going to be helpful in this situation because it kicked off this emotion, this fear, this, whatever. And now
Yep.
I'm not in the place I need to be that resonant leader.
Right. And my voice has got an edge to it, which they're going to read, they're going to understand. And so I'm not monitoring my thoughts and emotions. I'm not managing my behavior, my vocal tone, my words, whatever. Therefore, it's going to be dissonant, and it becomes not a virtuous cycle going up. It becomes a disastrous cycle going down.
Yeah.
And experts with people who are resonant leaders are able, they're first self-aware, self-controlled, then they can practice. And when we talk about empathy, we're not talking about soft kidding people. Oh, I
Yeah.
feel your
Right.
pain. Oh, I mean, some of that
It's not.
fake stuff. But it really is accurate in my definition, accurately assessing and guessing another person's thoughts and emotions. And some people are just completely face blind. They can't read other people's emotions. They can't read tone of voice. Well, some people are better at it. So if you're not good at it, practice that. And then you've got to be self-regulated so that you can use your tone of voice and your words in order to bring them to a better emotional state to instill hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like your analogy about the swing, and I'll try to take it to another level but if I go sideways, I apologize. I've put a lot of thought into it. But the jarring effect, like you talked about, somebody's going up, now coming back, and you just stop them. That's very jolting. That's jarring. And
Yep.
if you're in a conversation and you're trying to make the conversation better, and you're that dissonant leader, that's you hitting somebody at the wrong spot.
Right.
Versus, hey, they're going really fast and you catch them just slightly off and they begin to twist and rotate, and now it becomes a little bit, and now you're just trying to massage things back where they get, the forward and back so that then you can begin to slow them down or whatever. I don't know if that's a good extension of an analogy or not, but
Well, I mean, I think it's a great extension of an analogy, which is if somebody, let's say somebody is swinging out of control on the swing, it's how do you place, the push so that they get back in line and they're not going wild, and how do you slow a person down rather than stopping them immediately? And so when they're at the top, almost to the top, you join them and you slow it, and join them and slow it on the swing. And the same thing happens with people in a conversation when they're um, emotionally overwhelmed. You join it and you slow it. You join it. it's not fast. There's no miracles here,
Right.
um, because you're dealing with changing what's happening in a person's brain.
Well, let's talk about this in an application. Obviously, our context is real estate, and this
Hmm.
is we've talked about real estate and other high anxiety type of industries where this is most people's largest purchase they're ever going to make, and depending
Yep.
on where you're at in the process, like the day before is pretty anxiety provoking, and now something comes up, right? Because something comes up, and
Isn't
if
that
you're
always the way in real estate? Something always comes up, right?
yeah, what came up, how big of an issue it was, how quickly you resolved the issue. Did you get ahead of it and solve the problem before you brought it up? I mean, there's all manner of things that you got to take into consideration. And I guess where I was going with that is, as an example, I think most agents, if they're honest with themselves, can find themselves having their mind going off on tangents that are of personal interest to them, like, what does this mean for me? How am I going to figure out this problem? Is it a liability for me? Is this transaction going to go away? What does this mean financially? I mean, if you're honest, there's implications that a lot of people that come
Sure.
in right away, but it's unnecessary because the first person that you need to help get into I guess that resonant state or that better state of mind is your client.
Right. But if you're not self-aware and you're not self-controlled, you can't do it. Because if you're freaking out, like, I'm going to lose my commission. If I lose my commission, then I'm not going to be able to pay my rent this month. If I don't pay my rent this month, they're going to kick me out on the street, and I'm going to live in a van down by the river. And so if you start down that path, you can't be resonant because you're
Right.
not self-aware and self-managed. So you have to have practiced these things on yourself first before you can share that resonant um, frequency with other people. If you don't got it, you can't share it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talk about, certain things like obviously if it's a finance thing, obviously don't put yourself in a financially difficult position because then it's really hard not to have those questions because, let's say you had a year's worth of income or reserve or whatever, that's not nearly as big of an issue of, hey, I'm living paycheck to paycheck here. So don't put yourself in that position. Um, and I
But
guess,
let's use a different one. Let's
yeah,
say the house doesn't appraise. It
yeah,
doesn't appraise for the asking price, and they go, well, how do we solve this problem? And if you've never seen the problem before, then you're kind of freaking out as a realtor, thinking, oh, I don't think we can solve this problem. I guess the deal is lost. If you've done this or you've talked to people, you go, okay, here's the ways around it.
yeah.
And we can figure this out. There's a wonderful book that I recommend all the time by Marie Forleo, and it's called Everything is Figure Outable.
Mm,
I think everybody ought to read that book because you can figure things out if you believe or have self-efficacy that I can figure this out. And so when your customer comes to you, they've never had to figure out these problems before. These are all brand new problems for them.
they're paying
And
you
if
to
you're pardon me,
they're paying you to figure these things out.
they're paying you to figure these things out because you have seen these things before. They may have only bought or sold one or two houses. You, I hope, have sold a lot more, bought or sold, or been a part of buying and selling a lot more than that. So
Yeah.
you know what can go wrong and you know how to fix it. And so you can say, oh, I've seen this before. This is really an inconvenience, and I'm really sorry you had to experience this, but this is not a disaster.
Right. Right.
Here's
Certainly not to the
here's how
extent
I've
you think it is. Yeah.
Well, but right, because the way our brains work is when something goes wrong, we tend to easily imagine the worst case scenario. And so what I tell people is the way our brain works is that when you go to the elevator, our brain never goes up button, down button. It goes to launch and plummet. And so you would never get on an elevator where the buttons were labeled launch and plummet because I'm going to die.
Right.
And so what you as a realtor need to do is relabel the buttons because their brains are going to launch and plummet.
Yeah.
They're not going to up and down. Oh, okay, this is an inconvenience. delay it for a couple days, but we can figure that out. Well, where am I going to live? There's always temporary housing that we can find for you. And, we can work the extra money into the deal somehow. There are ways of solving these problems, and you've solved them before.
Well, and I love the way you're positioning my thought on the matter is, and we've had this on other episodes before, is who gets paid the big bucks? It's the people that solve the biggest problems,
Right.
generally.
Right.
So if you're
Generally.
not a person that implements metacognition, you're not aware of what you think, how you think, where your emotions are going, and so you can't even begin to be a resonant leader because you can't control your own. But even when you're in that state, before you're helping your client, you got to solve a problem. So
Yeah.
you got to manage, monitor and manage your emotions, be figuring out a solution to that problem very quickly. And then how do you, if your client's standing right there, you're doing it all simultaneously. Sometimes you heard it, you contend with it, you solve the problem, then you bring it to your client and here's the solution, hopefully.
Right.
But sometimes this is real time.
Right. And that's why practice and rehearsal on these kinds of problem solving makes you a trusted expert.
Yeah. What is your client going to do when they hear a big problem come out of nowhere, right? The lender says this in front of you. What do?
Yeah.
They look at you as the agent.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you can't
So how do we solve this
be,
problem?
wide-eyed. You can't, your voice can't be shooting up,
Yep.
because they know
Yep.
you ain't got a fix for this. And I'm concerned now.
Right. Right. And part of your job as a leader is managing expectations. So, nobody would go to a movie. Nobody likes to go to a movie where they don't have any idea about how it's going to be. Like if hey, we're going to the movies and you think you're going to a comedy and you go to a horror show, everybody's disappointed and vice versa.
Yeah.
So setting expectations about, okay, this is how this is likely to turn out.
Yep.
Letting people know what to expect so they can prepare themselves. Nobody likes a bad surprise.
Yeah. And I love it with my clients. I never pretend to be perfect and like there's never going to be a problem. And sometimes I'll just literally say, hey, there's going to be a problem. I don't know how big or small it's going to be, but we'll address it very quickly. We've got an amazing team, and we'll iron this out because every real estate transaction is unique. There is no identical real estate transactions. It just can't happen. So by
Right.
virtue of that situation, we're not creating widgets here, right? We don't have a QC
Right.
check at the end of this.
So if you say every real estate transaction, there's always at least one hiccup. And so when it comes, you can go, well, here's ours.
That's where I was
There
going
may
with
be
that.
another one, but
Yep.
this I didn't know what it was going to be, but this is the one.
Yeah. And by
And
the way, remember
and
I told you the great team that we have and that we're
yeah,
good problem solvers and we've done
and
this a long
we
time.
can figure this out. We will figure this out
Yeah.
because this they've got the buyers, the sellers, they've all got a lot more financial and personal investment in it because it's where they're going to live.
Yeah.
And people are pretty attached to having a place to live.
Pretty attached. Yeah. Well, and at this point, I like the idea that once they see the problem, yes, they're looking at you to identify, does this person have a solution for it or not, right? They're looking for your
Yep.
your facial responses, your mannerisms or whatever. And then you have to be really good at monitoring and managing your emotions because you have to gauge where they're at enough to send them away to figure out a problem. Some people you're going to say exactly what you just said. Remember, I told you there's going to be a problem. I'm going to go away. I'm going to fix it. And that's all that you need to say. Others,
Right.
it's a half an hour conversation.
Right, because what you're doing in that half-hour conversation is you're back at the swing. You're slowing them down. You're
Yeah.
re-guiding them. And so it's joining them in their emotional distress, letting their limbic system is firing. Their amygdala are firing. The thalamus, the hypothalamus, all of those all of those limbic brain functions are in overdrive, and it turns off the prefrontal, which is the problem solving part of the brain. And you've got to calm down the limbic system in order for the prefrontal to come back online.
Yeah.
So that they can think about it reasonably and take a long-term perspective. But all of that happens through soothing and comforting and slow and steady words. And one of the problems for dissonant leaders is that they think more information is going to told faster is going to solve the problem.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. I mean, you're going to get it out of your head and you're going, oh, okay, I did it. No, you didn't, because they couldn't hear it. I mean, it's all wah, 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 wah to them.
Yeah.
So it's about slowing it down and using your tone of voice and using slow cadence in order to bring people to get that limbic system not firing so much so that the prefrontal, which is the part right above your forehead, can come back online.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'll take it a next step further, at least in my real estate business. It's not even if you have a problem. It's just the level of anxiety. So, right, everybody has some anxiety. Let's just, for the sake of this conversation, a single mom, first-time home buyer, right?
Sure.
She texts you, and it's kind of a weird text. It doesn't really say anything. It just kind of, came out of the blue, and you're like, huh, that's interesting. What can you do? Well, you could kind of blow it off and, maybe she just said, yes, you better call.
Get on the phone.
Get on the phone. And by the way, everybody's different, right? That might be, hey, this person really just appreciated that you called them. That alone, okay, my guy's there. My agent's there.
What they're doing is reaching out for some stability. Is the person that I'm going to need to guide me through this process, are they going to show up? And when you do, they're like, oh, okay, they're there.
Yeah.
They're essentially scanning the environment for support.
Yeah.
Is it going to be there?
Versus a 2-hour lame response back or none at all because you chalked it up to just a butt dial or something, pocket dial. But somebody else, so the fact that you called, hey, glad you're there, just touching base. Okay, I feel better. Let's move on. And you can gauge that. Some people, it's an hour conversation about a lot.
Right. But what you're doing in that hour-long conversation is you're settling down the limbic, bringing the prefrontal back online. So you've got to let them spool it out.
Yeah.
And it's not a perfect analogy, but if you've ever had kids and you have a kid who's in a crying fit, you can't reason with a kid in a crying fit.
Right. Good luck.
You hug them, you hold them, you soothe them, and then once they settle down, then you can have a reasonable conversation. Well, the analogy is true. People, grown-ups are just, advanced forms of the same entity. They're having a freak out moment like a kid does, and you gotta get them calmed down before they can start thinking again. And that's not because they're defective people. That's because they're
human
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what I've learned too, Roger, and we haven't talked about this much, if at all, in my recollection here, but so let me back up a little bit. What we, coach and teach here specifically on the real estate team is the best business you have is the repeat and the referral business.
Yes.
If you worked with them before, that's ideal because you know each other, you know how you work, how you don't work, what you need to do. Unless you just didn't jive, and then you probably, I don't know, anyway, but let's assume you did because it was successful. And then referral business, right? So we're always focused on repeat and referral business. In my experience, when you spend the time, even if it's just letting them kind of go through the process that you just described, that you sat through there, you didn't bombard them with information and data and try to convince them of anything. It's just that you were available, that you let them talk, that you didn't even solve anything. You didn't even answer anything. You were just empathetic. You were sympathetic.
Right. And there's a subset of people who, when they're freaking out, they do want information.
Yeah.
You've met those people who pepper you with questions, information and data, and they get really drilled in on the details. Okay, well they need that information to feel. And again, it seems like they're more rational, but really what they're doing with the information is they're trying to avoid regret. They're trying to avoid a bad decision.
Yeah.
And so part of it is just filling in that data. So some of it's comfort. For some people, it's data. You have to respond to whatever people are giving you
Yeah.
in terms of their freak out moment, their embarrassed moment. I think, if you think about shame, embarrassment, and that family of emotions, if people are having trouble scraping together the money for their down payment, that's a time of embarrassment, and so they may delay getting back to you, and so helping people understand, hey, we meet people in these positions all the time. Let us help you solve this lack of money problem,
Yeah.
because there may be a way to solve it. You're certainly not alone in this. We've seen this before. So it isn't always just anxiety. Sometimes it's a sense of fear,
Yeah.
or not fear, of shame or embarrassment. Oh, I don't have enough money. I'm not rich enough. Or, I'm the first person in my family who's ever bought a house. We don't know how to do this. I came from the wrong side of the tracks, or
Whatever.
whatever it is. Let people know with that soothing, comforting tone. It's like, hey, yeah, we've worked with lots of people. They're the first person in their entire family's ever bought a home. Okay, let's
Yeah.
help you do this.
Yeah. Well, and also for those that are listening, we do focus on partnering clients with the right agent personality type. So typically, and there's all kinds of personality type tools, but we use DISC quite often, right? DISC, and
Yep.
partner the client with an agent that thinks in a like-minded way, right? I think a good analogy, a comparison might be, somebody that's a D personality that's very driven. They don't want a whole bunch of answers. You're only annoying them if you rattle off a whole bunch of stuff, and they're busy. Like they want to move on. Versus,
Yes.
a C is that person, like you said, like, man, I've got 100 questions here, and I want them all answered because I am wanting to put myself in a position where I'm not afraid of making a bad choice, and I need this data to come together so I can feel better. Anyway, so I just wanted to back up to, just so you know, at MHC, we're also trying to align client personality types with agent types because they do think a lot, because a D person is going to get annoyed by a C person, and vice versa. Or
Yeah. Yeah. And you're very often not dealing with just one buyer. Very often you're dealing with two buyers who are working as a team, and they don't always operate the same way. So
yeah,
you've got to figure out, okay, how do I read both how each of these people is dealing with this information, but then how are they interacting with each other, and are they spinning each other up, or are they
yeah,
calming each other down? So again, all of that requires, in these high stakes negotiation situations, it all requires a pretty high level of understanding people.
yeah, yeah. And even if you're not that type, so let's say the couple are different, and you're not even one of those two personality types. But if you've done this long enough, you realize who they are, and you got to get them data and information in the format, in the way that they
Yeah,
receive it best. And sometimes it might be frustrating because you're like, man, I'm not a hyper data driven person, but guess what I get to do? I get to go dig out some data and provide it to them. Because if I
because
don't,
that's what they want, right?
that's what they need. Yeah. In some cases, if things got a little squirrely. Anyway, what I was leading up to is I was trying to get back on track with my thought of, if you've done this stuff successfully, the likelihood of them being a repeat client and a friend or referring you business, in my experience, goes through the roof.
Yep.
They probably couldn't explain it, but they're like, they heard what I said. The number one issue in our industry is the agent didn't hear me. Well, where does that come from? Right? It comes from all the things we're talking about.
Right.
They couldn't hear you because their mind was elsewhere. They didn't provide an answer in the way that you need your answer, your data
Brains. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
your answer. So fix those two things, and they're like, wow, this guy's kind of a mind reader. This gal's kind of a psychic,
Right.
or whatever.
And
And they're
and,
amazing.
and repeat business and first person referral business is, it's very precious. It's there's so much less work involved in getting that business than it is getting first time stranger business.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, corporate America, client acquisition costs. That's
Hmm.
how they approach it. For me to have this client and have this business, did I pay a lead gen company for it? Did I spend
Right.
weeks or months with this person or whatever? And then by the way, now even when you have the client, you got to build the rapport and you got to build the trust, and to become a trusted advisor, you earn that. It doesn't
You earn it. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't immediately come, but if it was repeat business, you've already earned it. If it was referral business, in large part, it came via the referral. So I'm just sharing the things that you coach, that you teach, ultimately result in the business that a good business owner wants, the best type of business, but it's going to take work,
It
you know?
takes work, but it isn't just about dialing for dollars. It's about building those relationships because um, even the fact based people want people who are going to give them facts. They want to close that gap on the doubt they have. And part of the role of an expert, trusted advisor, is providing that data that way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
another time we'll talk about um, like, respect, and trust,
I
which
love
are
it.
the three key ingredients to a successful relationship in a sales endeavor, in a counseling endeavor, in a leadership endeavor. And so we
Yeah.
can talk about those three variables in the future.
I think that'd be a great next follow-on episode for sure. There was one other thing that I was gonna say. Shoot, but I was appreciating what you were talking about there. Um, but really, I guess until I remember that, I just want to stress the importance of understanding how you think, the metacognition side of things, working on how you monitor and manage your thinking, your emotions, because it just needs to happen.
Yeah.
And for yourself. And then if you're going to be a leader, again, lots of opportunities to be a leader, then, do that well and set that all aside. And then the appreciation that you have with your clients and your ability to do that, in my experience, is just enormously powerful. That they're like, wow. Oh, I think what I was leading up to, I was trying to remember earlier, is once you're in that state, at least in my experience, you can get ahead of the emotions. You're beginning to learn this person. You're like, oh, I know that this subject is going to be triggering, and I'm going to say this before we even get to this point. Like, hey, we're going through the inspection period. I can
Yeah.
guarantee you the inspector is going to find something because no house is
That's,
perfect and they're getting paid to find something, and it's all figure outable.
yes.
So you got
Yes.
ahead of that. Instead of inspector sent them the report, you didn't even talk to them. They read this 46-page,
Yeah. And you know, and all of a sudden the house is a piece of garbage, and
and they're
you have
out
to say no. Yeah, well,
or
I couldn't.
whatever.
Who would buy a house like that? And it's like, no, wait. They all look like this. Here are the important pieces because you're paying an inspector, and the inspector has liability that they're trying of you know to work against being liable. So they're going to find every problem.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's their job,
Yeah.
and you have to decide there is no perfect house. Which of the problems I can live with, and which of the problems that I want to have solved.
Yeah. And I also add in, here's the lens in which you need to look at it: safety and health issues, extremely high ticket cost items, and deferred maintenance. Look at the
Yeah,
report. It's 20-year-old home. We have to have realistic expectations of what it has. If it has mold, that's a health and safety issue. It's got to be fixed.
yeah,
If
yeah,
it's got a roof that's only going to last a couple of years, then that's a high ticket item that may or may not work for you. And you know, walking away is an option, but so is asking the seller to repair or replace it. So you
yeah,
kind of, tell them what's going to happen, preempt it with some of the solutions or the ways that you have to look at it, and some of the solutions that come in your experience from the exercise of due diligence period and
yeah.
inspection
Yep.
contingency addendum. Anyway, uh, I just wanted to interject that I think you can actually become almost a mind reader because you set yourself aside you know where this person is at, generally speaking, right? Sometimes you're more sympathetic than empathetic because I'm not a single mom, nor will I ever be.
Right.
A first time home buyer, it's been a long time, or whatever the situation is. And then they're just like, wow, this went super smooth because they set the expectations, they preempted everything, even maybe unknowingly, like, wow, they shared what was going to happen. Like, wow, they're really confident that this is the way it goes because this is the way it goes.
Right.
So,
And people feed off your emotion. And you said you can almost be a mind reader. Well, it's not that you're a mind reader, it's that you're developing empathy, the ability to accurately guess other people's thoughts and emotions. And the more experience you have, the more similar situations you've been in, the more accurately you can guess those thoughts and emotions.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Anyway, as per usual, we blew right past our half an hour. uh,
Yes, we
and
did.
and what's interesting is this topic. Is I didn't think there was so much to it, but man, it is just a powerful topic
It,
that I think
it,
everybody needs to embrace.
yeah, and again, Goldman's work has been widely poo-pooed as there's nothing to it. Maybe not widely, but there's some people who have poo-pooed it and said, "Oh, there's nothing to it." I think I think it's hard to measure, but I think the principles there are really really sound. And as we've walked through it, they're powerful in every area of our life.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because
yeah,
human beings are pack or herd animals. We interact and we feed off other people's emotions. And so we can, as leaders, manage those emotions, other people's emotions, so that the pack or the herd does better.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Well, very good. Well, let's make sure that our audience knows how to get a hold of you and what some of your resources are.
Yeah, probably the best way to find out about me is my website, drrogerhall.com, drrogerhall.com. On it, you can find my books, Staying Happy, Being Productive, DIY Brain, Expedition. We've got a new edition out that is available now on Amazon. And I have a book forthcoming called DIY Leader Brain, which is going to talk about all the things that leaders do to help monitor, and manage other people's brains. Many of the things we talked about today. You
Excellent.
can listen to my podcast, Second Thoughts, on all the Second Thoughts with Dr. Roger Hall on all the major podcast platforms, and follow me on YouTube, Instagram, or X.
What about your
Oh,
freakout quiz?
yeah, we got a freak out quiz. I've got an online course called Freak Out, and take the quiz, and it'll take you to learn about how you can manage your own fears. Forthcoming very soon is the online version of Expedition, which is a 15 week or 15 session course on leadership, which you know very well, Jared.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to kick off our next group and walk through the course. Folks that have been exposed to it, have gone through it before, just have nothing but rave reviews about it. Quite often comment that it's life changing stuff, and I'm totally inclined to agree with that. That would be my sentiment. So, very powerful. Definitely worth a read or the courses, in my experience.
Thank you for saying that, Jared. I'm grateful to know that it's affected the lives of, frankly, thousands of people at this point. So
Yeah,
I'm really grateful.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thanks again, Dr. Hall, and we'll wish everybody a blessed one. Take care.
Thank you.